For most of the podcasters that I meet, it's not that they don't understand that strategic content would be more effective. It's that they're so sort of trapped in the weekly to do, the hamster wheel of production, I sometimes call it, that they can't get enough space to approach it strategically. We all have a lot of responsibilities in our business that are not just the podcast. The podcast is not our business model. The podcast is a component of our business model. So how do we get some space so that we can sit back, so that we can review, so that we can plan assets that are going to buy us space in the future, and so that we can know that consistently, week after week, we have content going out that isn't just another episode, but is in fact an asset built to help our listeners get where they need to go, understand what needs to happen, understand what their needs are and how we serve them. Basically, how can we be using our podcast to generate, educate, and convert right fit clients? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. Welcome. I'm really excited because we're going to talk about the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind today. Last month, we sat down with Julie to talk about the impact it was on her show. She was in our first round. Last week, you heard from Molly, who was in the second round, our most recent round. Next week, spoiler alert, you're going to hear from Elizabeth. And I thought, you know what I've never done? We've run this 2 rounds now. We've done 6 months of this program. And never one time did I do a real formal introduction. Like, here is what it is. And so that's what we're doing today. We're going to break down what it is, how it operates, who it's for. If you're interested, if you're somebody who's been thinking about joining us in the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind, this is going to be super valuable because you're going to get a feel for what actually happens. Also, make sure you listen to those episodes with Julia and Molly and Elizabeth because they're really helpful. But even if you're not interested in the mastermind, if your instinct right now is to turn off this episode, I want you to listen to it for 2 reasons. The first one being, there's absolutely nothing I'm going to run through you can't do on your own. Spoiler alert. Everything I talk about, you could action on your own. Now, there is the advantage of doing it with a group, doing it with an expert. Both of those become advantages in the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind because you get support from me. Obviously, I'm teaching the program. I'm running the program. I'm in the program with you. This is not a guest teacher. This is not somebody from my team. I am the only one you will engage with at every stage of this program from a my company, my team perspective. The other component, though, is the people in the room. Like, you also get the support of the other people going through this. Our last round, and Molly and Elizabeth, I think this comes up in both of their conversations, are a great example of this. They were in a mastermind already. They were already in a program together, and so they had a real familiarity with each other. That was super cool. So if you've got some like mastermind buddies who, or accountability partners who are also doing this work, check it out. They knew what it would be like to sort of be in, working through my work together because they had been kind of doing that with the podcast already. They'd been supporting each other that way and talking through episodes and their impact. It was really cool, but that's a huge value in being with a group. But that doesn't mean you cannot replicate this. It doesn't mean you cannot do the things we're going to talk about and get the impact. Will you get the impact more or less? I don't know. It depends on you. I will say, for me, being in it with other people is helpful for me to see it from different angles. And again, we'll talk about this more in the course of the content. But even if you have zero interest in joining the program, just hearing what we talk through and why we talk through it is going to be helpful. The second reason, even if you are in no way interested in the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind, this is a good one to listen to. And this is, again, we could turn this show into a drinking game of me saying the word transparency, but in the spirit of full transparency, we have done episodes of this show and you have likely heard me use the term audio sales page. This episode is an audio sales page. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about building one of these for your show, building one of these for each of your programs, each of your offerings. You've seen other versions of this, what Working with Uncommonly More is like inside the Podcast Strategy Intensive. And I will link to both of those, but those are audio sales pages for our production services and for our intensive services. This is going to be our audio sales page for the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind. So again, even if you have zero interest in joining the program right now, listen to this episode because this is the kind of asset I'm talking about when I'm talking about an audio sales page. Was it best for me to tell you that up front and just be like, hey, here's what this is? Maybe not. But I want to be clear with you what's happening at all time. It's never my intent, ever, 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 to trick you, to, sort of run one over or run one by you. This is about getting you what you need to build your more profitable podcast. It's right in the title. Before we get started, I do want to invite you to join us for the next Podcasting for Profitability Roundtable. I love these calls, as I have been mentioning, as I will probably continue to mention, at least through this month, is that we do have a shift happening. We'll no longer be sending out a replay, so you do need to join us live for that call. However, that's where the real magic is. Let's be honest, how many training or roundtable or webinar calls have you really listened to the replay of? Certainly recently in your business. Maybe it's something you did way back when, but it's just not something you do anymore. That's what I'm running into too. I don't tend to either. And what I find is when there's not a replay, when there's not a recording, we're able to really show up for each other and for ourselves in the room. And so I want you to bring your questions knowing there's no replay. The conversation that happens in the room will stay in the room. So come join us. You can reserve your spot and submit your questions after you sign up. But first, you got to reserve your spot. And that happens at uncommonlymore.com/roundtable. There is, as always, a link in the show notes and the podcast player description if you need to find it. But you can simply type in uncommonlymore.com/roundtable and you'll go right to it. You'll see the date, the time. You can put it on your calendar. You can reserve your spot. You'll get an email. You can submit your question and then you'll be ready to join us for our next one. I cannot wait to see you there. With that said, I want to jump into talking a little bit about a program we launched last year and maybe one of the most fun things we did in 2023, the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind. So let's start off by talking about exactly what is the Profitable Podcaster Mastermind. The quick sheet on this program is that it's a 3-month program with 2 calls per month. We have the calls the first week of the month and the third week of the month. Traditionally, sometimes that changes because we need it to for the schedule, but generally it's the first week and the third week of the month. And the first week of the month, we come together for a workshop. This is where I'm teaching. We work through a workbook. We present everything we're going to be focused on that month. And then in the second call of the month, we come together for support. And so it's kind of like office hours meets co-working. So some people have been working on what I taught in the first call and have questions or refinement or want to run something by me. Some people are working on it on the call while we're talking it through. Both are acceptable and both have worked really well for people who've been a part of it. The asterisk, the nuance is in our third month. In our third month, we vary it a little bit. Instead of me just teaching on that first call, we actually sort of hot seat style work on strategy. So we go member by member, and each person gets a set amount of time, and we build out their next 4, 8, 12 weeks, depending on how prepared and how it flows, of content so that they can get a feel for what questions we're asking, what we're looking at, how we're stacking it. Now, some of this is generally already done because in that second month, we build a repeatable series, and that repeatable series tends to go in that first 12 weeks that we plan together somewhere. Generally, I'm trying to think if we've had anybody who hasn't put their repeatable series in that first 12 weeks we planned, but I think we've pretty much universally that's been the move. So some of that's already kind of handled with that repeatable series that we do in month 2, and then that last call of the month, I open it up for everything. So it's again hot seat style, like that second call of the month has been every month. But you can ask me anything about anything we've covered in the program, anything about podcasting, get my feedback, get my eyes on something. Oftentimes we'll review strategies, or last round we talked in our final call about a potential rebrand. We talked about repurposing a lot in our last call, some of the ways that can be done. It's been really a cool place to come together and kind of close out and catch anything we haven't covered yet. So any questions that we didn't cover in the course of our content, what's left? And most often it's questions that have come up since going through the content, I'll be honest. We've already sort of covered the things that they had questions about before, or refining what we've built in the course of the program. But that last call is whatever we need to cover. I like having this catch-all space because, again, it allows us to really dig in and talk through anything that we haven't covered so far, or refine any questions. And I find so often the biggest insights is actually in the answers, and maybe even more so in the questions that other people are asking. We do have a form that goes out with every email, I think, pretty much, that is a place to submit questions. So I do always prioritize those in that second call of the month, because I want to make sure we get those answered. But also it allows for the members to come into the call not having to be in that place of, and I'm hoping that this will resonate with you, and I'm not the only one that's been there, but I so often show up to like hot seat style coaching consulting calls going, even if I had questions when I signed up for this, even if I had questions when I got up this morning, I can't think of literally any of them now, like at all. And so being able to, when I have a question, put it someplace that I'm not responsible for is amazing. And so that's exactly what we've done with this program. There is an email that goes out from the very beginning that says, any questions you have throughout this program, leave it here. We always prioritize these on the call. So you have a place that you can put your question. What I also love about this is when those questions get submitted, spoiler alert, it's all done through monday.com, our sort of virtual office, our workspace, our project management, our everything, honestly. I actually talked a little bit about Monday and how much I love it on a friend and client, Tara Newman's podcast, when we reviewed her tech stack. Maybe I'll include those links because I love Monday. Anyways, I get a notification. And so if the question is somewhat urgent, or if the question has a really simple and quick answer, like a yes or a no, or a here's what to consider, or here's a tool that will solve your problem, or here's what I would use, I will often just email you. Full disclosure, I will also bring it up on the call and say, hey, this question came in. Here was the question. Here's what I recommend. Because then it's in the recording. Everybody is still served by it, etc. But you don't necessarily have to wait for an answer. And I do those within 2 business days. So you're going to get an answer. And that's what I love about that. So that's kind of the baseline structure. Let's talk now about some of the themes. I've touched a little bit on it, but in month 1, we kick off by auditing. We review the show. Again, in that first call, I present a workshop. You'll get a workbook. You will get a PDF version as well as a Word doc version of that workbook. I always send the doc version out during the call, or before the call rather. When you click on that, it will prompt you to create your own copy. That way you can keep notes right in that working document as we go through the lesson in the call. I also then, with the replay after the call, send out a PDF version of my workbook. So you have the original source material as well as your edits and your changes as you customized it to work for you. I personally think this is important because this is what makes your time in the program repeatable. This is what makes us move through this 3 months and you do this work and it's really impactful. And then we're done and you're on your own again, but you're not really, because you can go back, you can watch the replays of the call, you can work through your workbook, you can work through the original PDF version of the workbook, whatever you need to really start to bridge the gap between learning this and establishing this as your habits. And so we're building you a process to audit and strategize your next set of episodes. So we're auditing what's been, and we're learning how to look ahead and plan what's next. and really using that data to make those informed decisions. So month 1 is all about reviewing and auditing. Month 2, we focus on your repeatable series. This is sort of the first tentpole of your strategy because this is the lever we're pulling to buy you time in the future. To buy future you the ability to be like, I don't have the space for this, or I need to focus somewhere else. A lot of the ways we use this, and it's been built as we've worked through this with clients in the past, is around launch material. So this episode is actually kind of a great example of an episode that could, in theory, be in a repeatable series, right? It is an episode that is being built with the intention of sharing it over a long stretch of time. So as much as I'm talking about our very next round of the Profitable Podcaster, this episode will likely re-air or be re-released or included in emails too when I'm doing a Profitable Podcaster Mastermind 3 rounds from now. Next year, 2 years, whatever it is, I can use this asset. A repeatable series is built to be the same way. And again, for a lot of our clients, it's launch content. So think about like an email challenge that you would run as a build-up to opening the doors for a program. You can do the same thing on your podcast. We've talked about this. We talked about this with Rachel and repeatable series we do with her. Rachel Cook will include the show notes or the episode link in the show notes. But that's where we focus month 2 because it's where we can start getting some perspective on why we're releasing an episode, what the episodes themselves, our intent is with them, what their focus needs to be, and really allows us to shrink down. So not what do we need to do with the podcast, but in this 4 episodes, in this 5 episodes, whatever the case may be, what do I need? Why is this being played here? When would I release this again? What is the goal of it? We get to ask those questions in sort of a micro container. And then in month 3, when we go to build your 12-week plan, your repeatable series will likely go in there. Again, we've had this happen. I can't off the top of my head think of anybody who didn't put their repeatable series in that first run. But also, when we start to ask the questions about why does this episode need to be here? What do they need to know? We start with always, what are we selling? Who are we selling it to? Who are we selling it to and how are we selling it to them? From there, we can start to say, cool, what do they need to know before they buy this? And so we're starting to think about why an episode is existing where it exists or at all, frankly. And that gets easier because we've done that repeatable series work in that kind of micro level. We can now do it on more of a macro level. Make sense? I hope it does. So that's sort of the structure of those 3 months. Again, it's 2 calls a month, and we work through this very strategically so that they're kind of building upon each other. The work we did in month 1 pays off in month 2. The work we do in month 1 and 2 pay off in month 3. And by the time you round out month 3, you've got a much clearer look at what you need to do to get the results you want from your podcast. I would love to have you join us for our next round. Head on over to uncommonlymore.com/mastermind to reserve your seat, see the details for when our next round runs. If for some reason our next container is sold out, get on the wait list and you can join us for the next one. I mention this because I want to talk about who's in the container, because this is frequently an important question. A lot of people assume because of the price point, because of the structure, that it is only for new podcasters. And that's not true. In fact, of the couple of times we've run this now, we've had precisely one person who was launching their show through this program. And it was somebody who's been in business for a decade plus, who had a podcast in their business before and has shifted their business and is building a new podcast to sit in this new business that they've launched. And so they were an established podcaster launching a new project, not a new podcaster, if that helps sort of clear that up. In fact, you heard in my conversation last month with Julia, she'd been doing over 200 episodes. Molly, who you heard from last week, has done more than 100 episodes. Elizabeth, who you'll hear from next week, has done more than 100 episodes. The other couple of people did have newer shows, like under 100, but they still had established shows. They were growing. This is not for people who are brand new. It could work. I'm not saying it won't work. It absolutely will. You'll be ahead of the game, in fact. But I think sometimes there is this belief that because you've been podcasting for a long time, you cannot be served by learning some of these fundamental things, when in reality, as somebody who pretty exclusively works with established shows, like I said, our production clients have all done north of 25, 50 episodes. In most cases, they come to us in that like 50 to 150 window. They've been doing this for a year plus. They're in it. Most frequently don't have these fundamentals, because oftentimes when we're launching a show, we're so focused on just getting a podcast going that we're not necessarily doing as efficiently and as effectively as we can be doing it, because we're just trying to do it. It's just starting. And that's great. That's fine. That's not bad. But it does hurt us when we assume time in means we've covered these things. And maybe we haven't necessarily. And so this absolutely is a container for somebody who's newer in their show or who's more established in their show and just wants to be using their show more effectively and who wants to be running their show more efficiently. This is not going to be a fit for somebody who is unclear on what they sell, how they sell it, or who they sell it to. Like every other part of our work, it's really dependent on that. It is really, really hard to build a show to generate, educate, and convert when you don't know who you want to educate, what you want to educate them on, or what you want to convert them into. Like, it just isn't going to work in any container that we have. In this container, in the intensive, in production, if you're struggling right now to figure out what you need to say, what you need to be talking about, make sure you're clear on what you sell, how you sell it, and who you sell it to. Because if you don't have those components clear on your own, with me, with somebody else, it will not matter. You will not get the results you want until you have a clear understanding of that. Does that mean those things will never change? No. We've launched new offerings. We've evolved who we work with from time to time. We've shifted our focus. We've shifted our offerings completely, even in the course of this show. I've talked about the lifetime of this show. Like, there have been changes, but I can evolve because I know where I am now. I can go someplace else. I can figure out how to get there because I know where I am now. Because I know what I'm doing now, I know what levers I need to pull to make a change. And so you've got to be, it doesn't mean you do it forever. It doesn't mean this is forever. It doesn't mean you need to be committed to what your business will look like for life, but you do need to know what you want your business to look like right now. And ideally for the next 6 to 12 months. Again, does that mean something won't come in and be like, this is a great idea? It might. I'll be honest, that's what this program is. I was rolling through the year and being like, I like one-on-one. I like retainer services. I don't think I've really talked about it on this show. I'm sure I've talked about it somewhere. I could talk about it more if there's interest. Reach out and ask. But I like my business model. I like how I work with people. I like that I've got clients I've worked with 5, 8, 10 years. I love that. I also like to be able to get in and get out with a small group. I'm an extrovert. I like getting to hang out with a small group of people. And so I wanted this program to exist because I missed teaching. I missed teaching small group programs. I missed bringing together a small group to do some focused work, getting in there, getting messy with them, figuring it out, and then sending them on their way. I missed having that component in my business because I have 12-month minimum production client contracts, which, again, most frequently roll into 2 and 3 and 5 and sometimes 10 years. And I've got in and out intensives where I'm in it with you for a couple of hours one day. We meet again for 45 minutes a couple of weeks later, and then I'm done. And I have clients who I do that. I've done that with several times, who I meet with 2 to 4 times a year. And we do that, but I'm kind of in and out. Whereas with this, I get to kind of be in it with you for just a few months. And then you roll on and you do what you need to do. And we have had clients roll into other offers. But for the most part, you go. And Most of these people already have production teams in place. They've got an editor, they've got a VA who's helping them out, and that's been working. They just want it to work a little better. And so that's why they layer in this piece. I have mentioned a few times, but I don't know that I've said explicitly. This is a small group program. We've run it most frequently, both times, with 3 people. It maxes out at 5. I will never put more than 5 people in this container in the way that it looks right now. I really like 3 or 4 people because it allows us to give everyone a decent chunk of time for their hot seat time. We have run this 2 times now, one where no one knew each other before we joined, and another where a group of mastermind peers, accountability partners sort of booked in together, and that's how we run the second one. Both were great. If you have an accountability buddy, if you have a business bestie who also has a podcast and wants to do this work, it can be really cool to do it with someone like that. If you don't, this is a really great container to meet someone like that, where you can build that accountability relationship and start to see inside their show and what they're doing and continue supporting each other after our time together is done. I would love to now invite you to join us for our next round. If you head over to uncommonlymore.com/mastermind, you can reserve your seat. If for some reason it is full and you cannot join us this round, get on the wait list. You'll be able to join us next round. We are going to be running this program a few times a year as our production clients and that client load schedule allows. But we do have 3 dates, 3 sessions mapped out for this year that we've made space for. So if you missed us this first round, you can join us in one of the other ones. Best way to do that is to get on the wait list though, because an early private offer is usually extended to the wait list before sales ever open. As an example with our second round, you did not see a big push as we went into Q4 of me talking about this program because we sold it to some folks who had been interested the first round, but the timing wasn't right. I'm happy to do that again, should that be the case as we move through this year. Again, you're going to hear from Molly and Elizabeth and Julia in those other episodes. We will link to them in the show notes. I highly recommend going and checking out those episodes so you can hear from some incredible podcasters who have been in the program with me. And then come over and grab your spot. Ask your questions. Do whatever it is you need to do, but join us. uncommonlymore.com/mastermind. I'll see you there. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. Get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.